Hey, good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people, wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? As the entire world knows at this point, earlier this week, from when I'm recording for this episode, Pope Francis died of a stroke, which led to heart failure at the age of 88 years young on Easter Monday. Now, he was the first Latin American pontiff, Argentinian born, as many people know. But his story and the way he lived as a pope and lived his life, I'm sure will be celebrated for many, many days to come. And we'll get into the next steps after his passing. At this point, when I'm recording this, I believe he's already been placed into a lying state um, for the next few days of things to occur before his burial. Um, as this has all developed, and I remember Pope John Paul II passing away. I remember exactly where I was when he passed away. It was pouring down raining. I remember driving, going to a pizza place, and it just pouring down raining. For some reason, I was listening to local like AM radio that day, and just happened to come across the waves that Pope John Paul II had passed away. And so that was kind of my childhood's pope. I believe Pope John Paul II was a pope for like 20 something years through my childhood. So that's all I kind of knew about popes. Um, and so this one, obviously, I can't remember the name of the pope before Pope Francis, but there was another one who stepped down, and I can't remember his name right now. Um, but obviously, the pope is the highest, next to Jesus. I may be getting that wrong, but not the highest. Like, as some Catholics, they'll say that he's up there, but there is the Lord and, all the other stuff religious wise that does not place him at the absolute top. But he's, the Pope is a position of extreme regalcy and not royalty, but importance in the Catholic faith. And so, to any and all Catholics out there, including those who I know personally, who are Catholics by practice and by life, my condolences to you. Now, Pope Francis did have, his contention, if you will. Conservatives didn't really like Pope Francis, dislike in many ways. One of his priorities was advocating for migrants. Um, and so, depending on the crowd, that's not exactly something that's celebrated or followed as a norm in this world, and especially in this country. He had a welcoming stance towards LGBTQ plus people, and even at one point was quoted as saying, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about a gay priest, something again that didn't sit well with a lot of conservative Catholics. He also declared that, quote, being homosexual is not a crime. And he later approved blessings for same-sex couples with some conditions. I think you couldn't follow a traditional wedding or something like. There was some condition in there where you had to do this, or I wasn't going to approve it. But he, being open to that whole LGBTQ plus community was something that conservatives just didn't like. One of the things I admired about him and appreciated about him as a self-proclaimed science nerd. I've talked about being a physics and math double major at one point in my life in college. He's the first pope to use scientific data in a major teaching document. In 2015, his environmental manifesto, entitled Praised Be, urged a cultural revolution to correct what he called the, quote, structurally perverse global economic system that exploits the poor and turned Earth into, quote, an immense pile of filth. Again, using science and being there for the people who may or may not be able to fight for themselves, may not have the capacity or dollars or education or intellect or know-how or gumph if you will, to fight for themselves, he appeared to do that, which didn't sit well with a lot of people. You're not saying only conservatives had issues with him; other people did as well. Even the controversy, and I want to say it was Argentina. I may be getting that wrong, but he took the side of those priests, if you will, in the Catholic faith who were accused of doing some wrongdoing, I believe sexual in nature. To his credit, he did, from what I remember, apologize to them, asked them to come to the Vatican to apologize in person, which shows not only humility in being human and understanding the error in your ways, but the fortitude to being able to say, hey, I screwed up. Let me apologize to you face to face, man to man, or man to woman. So that's commendable. And he lived a life that seems to be, from all intents and purposes, commendable. And something you'd expect from a practicing Catholic who has the highest human position in the world. And so the conclave is one of the big next steps. 15, 20 days, the cardinal electors meet and vote. And one of the things I discovered, kind of prepping for this episode after the freshness of the news, we're only a couple days away from him passing. No harm intended with that freshness comment. But is that if you're over 80, you don't get to vote. Now, there's, 200 cardinals in the world or something like that. Actually probably 300 and something, but only 180, I believe, or something like that, get to vote because they're below 80 years old. Never knew that. That's kind of fascinating. It takes me to the state of our country right now, where we have 70, 80, 90, maybe even either congressmen, senators, even presidents. And I'm curious, and I haven't gone that far down a rabbit hole with this idea, curious why they would limit the voting power to 80 years old. My theory would be, sign of the times. An 80-year-old is not necessarily in touch with the same things going on in the world, going on even in the Catholic religion, that say a 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever the age range of cardinals in the world are. That maybe after you get to, 8 decades in life, you might be a little detached from the ability to see the world as most do who are younger than you. And maybe that same thing should be applied to our politics and government. That there should be an age range. You have to be 21 or at least 18 to serve in a government elected position. Obviously, I think 35 is for president, but maybe the cutoff should be 75 or 80 for service and power in our government. A lot of people exist today holding on to that power because they just don't want to go retire or lose that power or any combination or somewhere in between. But speaking of conclave, besides my fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, whose conclave will be this July, looking forward to that. I actually watched the movie that's called The Conclave that came out last year, 2024. And so probably the third or fourth thing I thought of after seeing the news of Pope Francis passing was that movie, because it took you through essentially the process that's going to occur now, at least by letter, not by act. Not to say a lot of the things that happen in that movie are going to happen, but at least the process part of it will be happening for the most part. And so it gave you an insight into the world post a pope passing away and how that's handled at the Vatican and the Catholic Church and the cardinals coming in, and some of the conversation and politicizing of things that you would think wouldn't be so political, but it's a voting. You have to garner votes, your qualifications, your networking, communications, your acts, all these things. Factor in whether you get this, and the number, don't quote me on the number, 185 cardinals to vote for it. And I believe you need 2/3 majority vote to be elected, and I'm using air quotes for those who are just listening, the next pope. And so, in case you have no idea what movie I'm talking about, Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow are some of the stars and actors in that movie. But it came out in 2024. Check it out. It's one of those sit down, have a snack, you got to pay attention. It's the devil's in the details, no pun intended. In that movie, but check it out. Definitely check it out. But there's a reason that Pope Francis is known as, and was known as, the people's pope. He advocated for immigrants, for the LGBTQ plus people, for science, and for all these things that people in this world, and I won't label them, but some people in this world have issue with, shy away from, blatantly discriminate against, whatever, exploit. And so he advocated for those people who, as I said before, may or may not have been able to fight for themselves, may or may not known that the possibility was out there for someone to fight for them. And he stood up in the face of a lot of people who told him, I'm sure, not to have these stances. Maybe you should choose a softer tone. Maybe you should shy away from this topic. So you got to admire a man that does that. And so the world waits for the next pope while realizing that Pope Francis was someone who, hopefully to you, at least to me, left a positive mark and made the world a better place than he found it. Before I get to the last thing in my head, Dave's Head Podcast is now a part of the Alive Podcast Network, home of Black voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Head Podcast adds to the catalog of over 70 titles available in the Alive Podcast Network and the app for both iOS and Android. Check out Dave's Head Podcast and many others in the Alive Podcast app, the home of Black voices. I'm looking forward to, by the way, before we move on to the last thing in my head, there are potentially some big announcements coming from the Live Podcast Network as it relates to Dave's Head Podcast. A lot of things considering what to do next, big steps, think about where we are now, jumping up the next level, big decisions to make. Season 6, a lot of stuff happening. A Live Podcast Network is already one big portion of that. Check us out on YouTube, check us out on Spotify, and so many other venues and vehicles and all that stuff you can check us out on. One big one might be coming next. So tune in. The last thing that's on my head is allergies. And more so allergy free. And now I'm going to knock on wood, right? So far this year, my annual spring gateway to allergy season where my entire body shuts down for 2-3 days hasn't happened. Now, I talked about how windy it's been. I said it feels like it's been windy for 3 months, I think the last episode. But is that the cause for it? Maybe it's just blowing away everything I'm allergic to. I have no idea. Some quick research, and I really quick. Trust me, I'm not an allergist and whatever that practice professional name is. I'm not that. But I did some quick research. Dr. Google. And wind apparently makes allergies worse. By all intents and purposes, everything I found online says wind, and more wind equals bad, and more bad allergies. But maybe we also had the rain, right? We had a lot of rain in the state that I live in. High winds, a lot of rain. Rain pushes down pollen, pushes down ragweed, all that stuff, but wind kind of spreads it. Water, rain, also feeds mold. Now, again, I don't claim to know exactly what I may or may not have been allergic to for the last X number of years, probably a decade at least. I just know when spring came around, my ass was laid up on a couch for 2-3 days. And then I was fine the rest of the year. But that initial destruction of all bodily function for 2-3 days happened every single year in the spring. It wasn't ever attributed to a cold or flu or even COVID. It was always some sort of allergy, some sort of blow up. And so this year, again, knock on wood, nothing has happened. We're almost to May. This is usually happens late March, early April. We're at the point of no return almost, where, at this point it gets to be 80-degree days, 90-degree days. Allergies don't bother me at that point. And so looking at Dr. Google and looking at all the indicators for allergies, every single one says allergies are high across the board for 30 days before, and the next 15 at least. Right before I started recording, I checked again. But it doesn't seem to be impacting me at all. And part of me wants to know why, as the internal thinking person that I am. Have I done something right? Have I changed anything? I have no idea, because I never paid attention that deeply to prepping for allergy this or prepping for allergy that. Now, I will say, on 2 occasions in the last 2 weeks, because I knew I was going to be outside golfing, because that's what I do, I did do my nasal spray that I do every single year as a precaution. Just because I had no idea, going to be outside for the first time in that environment for an extended period of time and multiple days in a row. So I did my spray. Did golf 3 days in a row last week, and I did it the first day, completely forgot about the next 2 days, and neither day did I have problems, really. And so, again, what's different? I don't want to jinx myself. I don't want to wake up next week and go, damn it, why did I talk about this in my podcast? But I'm curious as to why. And so I'm curious, are your allergy symptoms way worse this year? Way better this year? The same as it's been every year for as long as you can remember? What say you? Because to me, my allergies are non-existent this year. Or my body's used to them, fighting them off. I have no idea. But I'm just curious. I want to know, because I want to continue this trend going forward. I don't want next year to come back with a vengeance. So I want to know if there's something I did, or if this is just a natural selection type of thing, or what it is. But I'm happy. I'm definitely happy that my allergies have not kicked my ass this year. And by kick my ass, I mean literally kick my ass. But that's what's in my head. Normally in this segment, I bring in my guests. I lead in with a article or a conversation around the topic that we're going to talk about with my guest, and then I bring them in. Unfortunately, this episode, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, which prevented us from bringing in our guest, who was going to talk about grinding and resilience and all those things. And I figured I would bring you something from my head, as this is Dave's Head podcast. Talking about resilience and determination and perseverance, and those things that we go through in life, and how we deal with those things, how we grow, glow, and promote all the things that take us from here to where we're going or trying to go. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is, and as I thought about this, it really resonated in me and became something I wanted to talk about in this moment. Because one of the questions that I had queued up for my guest, who was going to talk about resilience, determination, perseverance, grinding, life lessons, all those things, was the loss of his father. And so I hadn't talked about the loss of who I consider my second father, my uncle, on this podcast in depth and at any point since it happened. My uncle was someone who was a pivotal, important role in my life. He helped to refine the ability that I have to stay calm in chaotic situations. A lot of things have happened in the past week, in the past couple weeks, personally, professionally, extracurriculars, where I've heard multiple people say, man, I wish that, literally last night, not even lying, Literally last night, I had a conversation with someone, and they said, "Man, I really wish at some point I would hear you snap. I wish that I had that ability to just do that. I don't. I'm very analytical. I think about a lot of things before I act. A process that I go through, all those things. And thinking about my uncle and the mindset that he had, and thinking about the people who've influenced me and enabled me to be resilient, to have the determination to push through different situations, and thinking about, in full transparency, what I've talked about in my podcast the last couple of years, going through my own personal situations, going through my prominent, most problematic, troublesome, problematic. Try to put those two words together, and the thought didn't work out. But troublesome and problematic situations, most notably my divorce, and how I was raised, how I grew as a man, how my interactions with my uncle and his influence on me, and going through the experience of seeing him deteriorate and pass on, was something that I internalized, right? Because, a lot of people will be scarred in a way that's detrimental to their moving forward in the life that they're meant to lead. And many people, I'm not going to trump this, right? I'm not going to claim that half the world is saying this, but a number of people have said that they don't know how I got through that situation, knowing what he meant to me. Not to diminish his role, his importance at all, but more so to say he taught me how to deal with it. And so that's where resilience, determination, perseverance, and the ability to grind through life in a way that's productive for you, learning lessons for you, applying those lessons in the things that you encounter, and then just simply saying, you know what? I've seen this before. I understand what's happening. I'm able to adapt and move forward. That's where, when you ask the question, how did you deal with your uncle passing? How did you deal with your second father passing? How did you deal with one of your closest friends, passing a month later? How did you deal with your second mother passing too long after that? And I can go down the line, back to high school, back to middle school, back to post high school, college, all the funerals I've been to in my life. What gets you through those things is saying to yourself, really, death is a part of life. And while it's never okay, absolutely never okay, the ability to find where you are in that moment, understanding that you are not at fault, you can't control anything that's happening around the situation, and being able to move forward, remembering, because that's key, remembering the people you lost in love, right? Remembering them in love. Applying the lessons they tried to, hopefully did provide to you, and applying the lessons that were negative that you need to learn from. Taking whatever you can from the experience you had in the moments that you shared with them through their life and through your life. That's what's important. One of the things I say to my mentees whenever I talk to them, almost every time, it's one of those weird things that I try to reinforce over and over and over and over again, is that life is short, decisions are long. Decisions you make today impact tomorrow and every tomorrow after that. And so it's important to consider your positive, your negative choices, the neutral choices, and more so, what does that entail for down the line? You can think about A to Z and all the choices you have, the options you have, the things that can determine what you do with your next step. But if you don't think about the repercussions of those decisions, you don't think about if I don't do this or I do that, if you don't think about those things, you'll find yourself in what people call a pickle. Perseverance is something that's chiseled and harnessed. Resilience is something that you only get when you stand up and realize, as you're looking back, I survived that. Determination is a thing that motivates you to want to stand up, motivates you to want to step forward, motivates you to want to continue to walk down that path despite everything you've encountered before you, or behind you, excuse me. Resilience, determination, and perseverance are key components of grinding through life. I continue to learn that lesson. I continue to experience that lesson. And if you don't learn from the things you go through, forget being doomed to repeat them. That's a natural understanding. If you don't learn through the things and because of the things you go through, yeah, you're doomed to repeat them. But you're also doomed to continuously and repeatedly fail to understand them. And that's really what it's about. Understanding the grind. Understanding the things that you go through, the things you experience, the people you encounter, both good and bad, the situations you encounter, both escapable and the things that you're stuck in. All those things come from experiences, resilience, determination, and a perseverance to work those things through to the other side. It's one of those things where you want to look at the ability to move past self-doubt. It's all about you. Whether you want to believe that or not, it's all about you. If you don't believe in yourself, there is nobody out there empowered to believe in you. That's what it's about. Grinding through life, understanding the next step, walking the path you choose. Nobody else, you choose. And as I always say, enjoying life because life should be fun. I appreciate the effort to record this segment from the guests that I had lined up for this episode. Technical things happen. We punched. We took a punch, first round, second round, third round. We got to like the mid-fourth round and we just finally called it quits. But sometimes technology fails you, and that's what it is. If you took anything from this, the grind is about you. It always has been and always will be. Whether you believe it or not, you have the power. You have everything you need in you to survive any situation you encounter. You have to believe that. And if you don't believe that, call out to your circle and let them reinforce that belief in you. Because that's all that matters. That you believe what you can do. My absolute favorite segment of my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. The ACLU, Northern California, has an article entitled Know Your Rights, U.S. Airports and Ports of Entry. Now, the first sentence in this article sums up the sad and real state that we currently live in this country. I'm quoting. Now more than ever, it's important to know your basic constitutional rights when entering the United States from abroad. Now, you, assuming, if this is not your first time watching or listening to Dave's Head, you're familiar with the fact that my GRIN stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. I also just said that. So why is this topic a GRIN? Because to me, your constitutional and human rights are always great reasons to be in love with now. Exercising those rights, not having those rights trampled. Liberty, the ability to simply be, is always a great reason to be in love with now. You matter. Your rights matter. The way you want to live your life by your own choosing matters. Traveling here and there to take part in the beautiful scenes and experiences that this world has to offer shouldn't be hindered by people who want to trample on your rights. There have been many reports of rights being violated by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. Some people refer to them as CBP. Even when American citizens are entering the United States. It's sad, disgusting, and just in countless ways. But knowing your rights is a great way to handle just about any situation that you may encounter. Now, a power-hungry, rights-violating bully with, maybe a what's it called? Napoleonic complex, maybe added in to boot. And that's exactly what they are, a bully. Will not exactly care about your rights. And knowing your rights may be just simply inconsequential to you being able to exercise your liberty. And so this GRIN really talks about how you can travel to and fro coming into the country as a citizen. And I'm addressing American citizens. I can't really address a green card thing or if you just have rights to be here and all that stuff. I'm talking about naturalized, U.S. born, home of the brave, rah, 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 American citizens. So I'm going to cover 3 topics. And again, think about this as a good thing, a thing to prepare yourself in case you run into a situation that's undesirable, making your way through to enjoy the rest of your day, your week, your month, your life. So as it pertains to questions, as U.S. citizens, you only have to answer questions establishing your identity and citizenship, in addition to, custom-related questions, like you're bringing back $10,000 more, you're bringing back some plants, and how much duty-free did you get, that type of stuff. Now, refusal to answer other questions may cause delays, but officials may not deny you entry into the United States if you establish your identity and your citizenship. Religious, political beliefs, associations are protected by the First Amendment. Questioning individuals about their religious or political beliefs, associations, or practices can infringe upon rights guaranteed by the Great Constitution and federal law. You don't surrender those rights at the border. You don't surrender those rights because you don't like a particular president or a policy. You don't surrender those rights because you have on a t-shirt for the other party or a people or person that someone doesn't like that day. Constitution is Constitution. And when you leave the United States and come back in, you don't temporarily waive your rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Second thing is devices. And so there's been a lot of talk about devices, confiscation, getting copies of data, looking at email, social media, all this stuff. So CBP claims the authority to search and confiscate laptops, mobile phones, digital cameras, and other electronic devices upon entry into the United States without any suspicion of wrongdoing. Now, I will say I believe that there are some cases that are out there working their way through the system up to the Supreme Court to kind of address some of these things that may or may not be perceived or actual invasions of privacy and violations, therefore, of the Fourth Amendment and the Constitution. Fourth Amendment banning unlawful search or seizures, blah, blah, blah. So the agency also claims the right to make a copy of information found on electronic devices. You cannot be denied entry to the U.S. for refusing to produce passwords, provide device access, or submit electronic devices for search. However, if you refuse, you might be detained, your device may be seized, and could not be returned for hours, days, weeks, and even months. And so there are some things that are recommended for travel with your devices. You know, some people say get a burner phone if you want to, something that's temporary you can take out of the country that works. You can contact your loved ones, and then you come back in. Who cares? You want to take the phone? Go ahead. You can look at Bob Smith and a pizza delivery order phone number that I ordered while I was away. There are other things with regards to if you do take your personal device. Some recommend turning it off because, you know, at least for iPhones, I'm team iPhone, so that's all I really know. When you turn the device back on, your thumbprint or your Face ID does not work. You need to put in your password. Well, if you don't put in your password, you can't really get into your phone. There are ways to backdoor that stuff that I'm sure the government and other officials have access to, but there are other security measures you could do in your phone, like things like, hey, you only get to put the password in one time before it erases everything, right? Put the password in incorrectly, I should say. And then if you do that, phone automatically starts erasing, blah, blah, blah. You can take precautions like that. You can take precautions like, you know, making sure you take things off your phone that you don't want viewed, you know, attorney-client privilege stuff if you're a lawyer, political stuff, you know, log out all your social media, all the stuff you can do before you travel and then come back, right? Again, shouldn't have to do this. You're an American citizen. You're free to think, believe, and speak what you want. It shouldn't matter whether it's on your device or not. But in case someone does bully you into providing that, there are some precautions you can take. Third, and I think most important, are documents. Now, I think it goes without saying in any and every situation, whether in an airport, a job, a business, a hospital, courtroom, do not sign any documents you do not understand. I'll say that again. Do not sign any documents you do not understand. Because you want to be careful not to sign away your rights, especially when you're traveling abroad. But we're speaking about coming back into the country, but you also have to be let into the country. Even as a U.S. citizen, you have to show that you're a U.S. citizen to be let back into the country. And so signing something before you're actually let into the country could reduce or remove your ability and right to be let back into said country. So again, third time, I want to really put a stamp on this. Do not sign any documents you do not understand. Now, government officials should not, quote, phrase, should not pressure you to sign any documents giving up your authorization to travel to or enter the U.S., but the key word there is should not. Right? It's kind of like legal jargon where it says shall remove or can remove, right? It's not a must. It's a shall or should. Anyway, so those three things. What questions do you have to answer with devices or the questions around devices and documents? Those are the three areas that really you should concern yourself with traveling. But knowing your rights about those three things can go a long way to making your process through customs and border protection easier, make you less susceptible to your rights being trampled on, your person, your belongings being violated, and protect you so again you can move forward with your day, your week, the years, and your life. I'd also recommend getting a copy of the Traveler's Bill of Rights. It's a small little pamphlet. It looks like a passport, but it's a Traveler's Bill of Rights. ACLU, Northern California. You can get it from their website. You can download it, print it yourself. I'm sure you can find it. You may be able to find a hard copy somewhere. I don't have a copy here to flash on the screen real quick. but I'll show you a picture in post production to review just before you travel out the country. It's important to know your rights, and it's important to maintain your composure. It can be very startling. A bunch of people surround you with guns and ask you a bunch of questions and plexiglass, and you just want to get home. Might be a long day. It's important to maintain your composure, your dignity, so that it can't be said about you, this person was this, and so we did that because this person was this. No excuses. Don't give them one. If ultimately someone in the position of power, because that's what it is, position of power or authority, wants to violate your rights, they will do so. And your repercussions there are to, if you feel your rights have been violated or being violated, just gather as much information as you can and act once you are safe. Whether that's safely in the country, even if it's delayed by a number of hours, once you are safe, sit, gather everything, write it down, put it in your iPhone, iPad, get a napkin, whatever. And I can't and I won't. Say that again. I can't and I won't tell you how to respond if you feel in danger. I also can't tell you how to respond if your rights are being violated. Every person is unique and different. Hopefully you'll respond in a way that keeps you safe. But I will say this, my life is the most important thing to me. Most important thing I have. Most time is part of that. I always say time is our most precious commodity. Well, time is associated with life. And so my life is the most important possession of something I have. And I will do what I can and feel to protect it. Same goes with the people I love and care about. And so hopefully that belief and that feeling doesn't translate into me having to take steps to secure my person and my family. That puts me in danger because of, again, someone abusing their power, violating my rights, etc. Many times with positions of authority, people say, just get to home. Deal with it legally later. That's the very short suggestion that I can make, with the caveat and asterisk, or however you want to put it, that life is very unique and every situation is not the same. And so my hope for you is that this GRIN, while not our typical GRINs, at least empowers you to educate yourself before you travel on what your rights are, what you should and should not do, what you can and cannot do, what you must or don't have to do in these situations. Again, the copy of the Traveler's Bill of Rights, if you can, get a copy of it. It could just refreshen your knowledge on your rights coming into the country. Lastly, before I let you go, as we get closer to summer break, and we take a break in the summer, you do know that, right? So that's getting closer and closer. We're a couple episodes away. Getting excited because that means warmer temperatures. I think we're going to come close to 90 next week or the week after. I've already been scoping out, looking for the first 90-degree temperature day, by the way. So I'm excited. Not that I'm ready to not do this anymore. I just like my summer breaks. Thank you. But before I let you go, as always in the last this season anyway, I'd like to leave you with a quote to kind of cap out this season. We talked about in the beginning Pope Francis, who passed, and that process, and we talked about rights and the things that he stood for and fought for very bravely, even in the face of critics and so many others. This quote is from Antonio Guterres. He's a Portuguese politician and diplomat who's currently serving as the 9th and current Secretary General of the United Nations. He's been doing that since 2017. His quote goes like this: "When we achieve human rights and human dignity for all people, they will build a peaceful, sustainable, and just world." There's not much more that I can or even should add to that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The disconnect may be out there somewhere that by looking for human rights and human dignity for all, that somehow it diminishes those who already have it, or diminishes even further those you're trying to help because they're not doing for themselves. You have to help them. The problem with that is it's looked at as a tit for tat or quid pro quo or giving something when our handouts. That's the big catchphrase for the last decade or so. Human rights and human dignity are none of those things because they start with the word human. You deserve those things. You deserve rights, inalienable rights. You deserve dignity simply because you're a human. And until every human in this country and around the world gets at least those things, then we all are diminished because something we may or may not have, someone else doesn't. That can be looked at as a socialist view, or spread the dignity, spread the the rights type of thing. To flash back to Obama on the campaign trail, his first campaign for president, that is. Spread the wealth. Google it. But it's more so when you apply the word human to something, right? Human dignity, human rights. Those are something that belong to everyone. Should not be taken away, shouldn't have to be given. In a peaceful, sustainable world, as Antonio says, it is more possible if every human is simply just treated fairly, given those rights, just because they're a human, by birth, not by a person. Having that dignity because they're human. Not because some constitution or some law gave it to them, but because they were born. Because day zero, that came with their DNA. It's not like a video game. You reach the big boss and you beat him, so you get some rights, you get some dignity. No. When that game starts, that's one of the bullets you got in your bag. Bullets probably a bad one there, but you get what I'm saying. So, the people's pope, grind, and rights. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. If you enjoyed this episode, I'm sure you'll love similar content in the Alive Podcast Network app. Plus, you can support this podcast and enjoy ad-free listening to nearly 100 other Black-hosted podcasts. Download the iOS or Android app, become a member, and experience unlimited access to Black-hosted content week after week. Follow, like, and or subscribe to this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and or X at Dave's Head Pod, and on YouTube at Dave's Head Podcast. For more information and links to all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Episodes premiere on the second and fourth Fridays of the month. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, enjoy life because life should be fun. Take care.